This is a slab of wood that's 2x4s laminated together, a bunch of old junk wood. And I'm going to make a workbench or countertop with this. I'm not sure yet. It is about 6 feet long, just a little bit over 6 feet, and 2 feet wide. I've made several of these, and you can see it's very rough. These are just old junk 2x4s. Some of them actually came out of this house when I was remodeling it. It takes 16 rows of 2x4s to come up with a slab that's 2 feet wide. And what I try to do is I try to use a full 2x4 on the ends, and then sometimes in the center you'll see that I've joined a few together, small pieces. And today's project is we're going to take this outside because it's a mess, and use the router and a jig that I made with my son. And we're going to smooth this thing down on both sides. So we'll smooth it on one side, flip it over, smooth it on the other side. Hopefully it'll all go well, and we'll see what it looks like from the beginning today until completion. I moved the slab out here to the driveway where we're going to do the work, and I've got it set up on 2 sawhorses. It's a beautiful day out here, but this is a really dusty job. We're going to create a lot of sawdust. You don't want to do this inside. There's something going on with this slab or my setup here with the sawhorses, so I had to put a little wedge in right here to even it up. It could be that the slab is twisted. It could be that the driveway is twisted. What I'm going to do is pin this into position right now so it doesn't move around as we're doing work. And in order to do that, I want to get one side done and stabilize it, and I'm going to do that with some blocks and some screws. I've got the slab blocked down. It's jammed in between these blocks, so it's stabilized. It's not going to move anywhere. And the next thing I have to do is I'm going to run the router in this direction, and when it gets to this edge, if there's no wood backing up that edge, that router will cause something called chip out. It's going to blow out some of the wood here, and I don't want that to happen. So in order to avoid that, I'm going to take some junk nails that I pull out of some wood. I always try to reuse these things. You can see they're kind of bent up. I'll unbend them and I'll use them again, and keep using them. I've got some junk wood here, just some pieces, doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to stick it on here with those nails. I'll hammer it on, and this gives that router a place to continue. So these are sacrificial pieces of wood. This is the last time they're going to get used. They'll get thrown away after this, most probably, and they will take a little bit of that router blade in there, but those being on there will make sure that this edge does not chip out. So I'll nail those on. I nailed on my sacrificial boards here to prevent chip out, and now I'm going to set up some rails on either side of my slab, and they will be the rails where I can slide this carriage that we built. Again, this is just junk wood, and it's set up so that this is the bottom of it, and it will slide along those 2 rails on either side. This is a jig that we built just for this purpose. A jig is just some tool that you build that helps you out a couple of times probably. And I'm going to set this up, and it's a little bit probably hard to see at the moment of where I'm going with this, but you'll understand it completely once I get it set up here. So I'm going to install these rails on either side now. They have to be spaced a certain distance so that this sled slides properly on them. The router is then going to slide in the sled, and that's going to give me a nice level cut all the way across the top. So I'll install the rails, I'll install the sled, and next we'll see the router and how it works on there. Got one rail fastened down. I use a little piece of metal with 2 holes in it, just a little bracket. You can see one right there. It's screwed to the bottom of the rail, and then I turn the rail over. That one's upside down, and then I screw through the sawhorse and secure the rail. So the way that I've found works best to get the spacing correct on these rails is to screw one down. Then we're going to come over here, put the other one roughly in place where we want it, and it's ready to screw down. The brackets are already installed. And then we're going to take our sled, stick it on here, put it nice and snug up against one side, and then we can adjust the other side from that. And you don't want these things super tight. Everything's crooked and bent a little bit, so you have to give it a little bit of play, and then you can slide it along all the way down. Pretty happy with that side right there. So let me screw this end down. Slide that out of the way. A little challenging to do this with one hand. Let's see if we can do it this way. Yep. Let's check it, make sure that's where I want to be. Good, good, all the way down. Slide the sled down to the other end. Good. And that's where I want to be right there. And I'll screw that one down. And at that time I'll give you when I come back, I'll give you a big picture look at what's going on again, and then we'll pull out the router. The slab has been leveled, installed, clamped down with some blocks. We installed rails, got the sled that rides on the rails all the way down. Nice smooth slide. Now my sled has a guide on one side, a guide on the other side. The router can't go outside of there. It's got a round plate on the bottom. I'll show you in a second. It's got a slot in the middle. This is where the cutting happens. We'll start down at this end. And the idea is we're going to take a little cut, about a ½ an inch, move the sled a little bit, take another cut, move the sled a little bit, take another cut, all the way down. It's not going to come out perfect. Never does. The bit that I'm using has done a few of these. It's probably could use a little bit of sharpening, and there will be a little bit of sanding that needs done after this. So here is the router that we're going to use. It's a Bosch, pretty heavy duty, and this is the bit we're going to use. It's a flat cutting bit. It cuts on the sides, but we're going to be cutting using the top of the bit. Actually, it's going to be installed, it'll be the bottom of the bit. And of course, anytime that you are using this machine, this is a pretty dangerous machine. It's got a lot of power. The blade is exposed. You got to really pay attention to what you're doing when you're using this. It's scary if you never used one before, and you certainly could hurt yourself very quickly with this thing if you're not paying close attention. So here's the bit. The bit goes up into here. There's 2 bolts inside there. I've got 2 wrenches for those bolts. And all you do is you turn 1 wrench one way, turn 1 wrench the other way, put the bit all the way in, and that's going to tighten it down. So let me get the bit installed. I can't do that with one hand. And next time you see it, it'll be back over on the sled, and we're going to take a cut. Been at it for about 5 minutes, and I would say that's probably maybe a third of it. Just a little short of a third. It goes kind of quick. It's a little bit tedious, but you can see there's some of these boards have not even been touched by the router blade. I just don't want to go that low. I'll lose that too much material. It's kind of hard on the blade. I'd rather save that depth for the top. But you can see still some lines every time we make a pass. So you could count the passes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like that. Every time we make a pass, it leaves a little line, but those sand out pretty easily. Won't sand them out on the bottom, probably just a light sanding. And then we'll give this 1 coat of something. The top, we'll spend a little bit more time and try to get that smooth. So I'm going to continue the rest of it and show you what it looks like when it's done before I flip it over and do the top side. This is the bottom side, smoothed up. Again, I didn't take it down so far that I touched every board. Some of these boards are low spots. That's fine. This is the bottom. We're going to try not to do that on the top when I turn this thing over next. After I have a biscotti brake. Going to undo all this jig, undo this rail, unclamp the board, uninstall the sacrificial junk boards that we put on the side, reinstall those, flip this thing over, put the rails back on, throw the sled back on, and start cutting the other side. And that'll be our final, our good side. This is the top side all set up, ready to go. And what I did was I slid the fence, or slid my sled up and down past the rails and visually checked underneath here as well as I could to try to find where the lowest spot is on this wood. And I set the depth of my router to that lowest spot. And unfortunately, this is pretty wavy, and so to get a nice smooth top, I think we're going to take off more than we took off on the bottom side by quite a bit, maybe twice as much. So on the bottom side we took off, I think, probably 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch. On this one it could be 1/4 of an inch in some places that we're going to take off. And but I think I've got the bottom. I'll do a few test cuts across what I think the low spots are to make sure that we're cutting all the boards all the way across on those low spots. And then once I'm sure that I've got the blade set at the right size, I'll move it back down here to the right hand side again and start from right to left. Here is the mess we made. Had to go pretty deep to get it all smooth there. Probably 1/4 of an inch, which that router and that blade are okay with that as long as you go slow. And really any deeper than that, really I should have took another pass at it. So you know, take off probably 1/8 of an inch and then come back and take off another 1/8 of an inch. So I would say right at the limit there. So I'm going to clean up this sawdust and see what our results look like before sanding. It's pretty good. Came out as expected. You can see we touched every board with the router. So that's a perfectly true surface there all the way down. There's still some blemishes in it. There's still, might have to make some repairs. Got something going on here. Go to the other side. Pretty rough board there. We'll have to see how we're going to repair that. Don't know what this is. I'll have to do some repairs on there. We'll have to do some filling of the cracks. And a good sanding. But it's, see if we can tell anything from the edge here. Came out good. Alright, next time you see this, we'll be doing some sanding and filling and finishing. Crybaby Mike. He's always crying about something. Okay, see you on the next video.